Great. Well, lovely to see you today. And yeah, we thought today we might cover forgiveness as a topic, particularly relevant, perhaps at the moment with so many things going on. I was reading over the weekend a nice and a particularly true saying of Khalil Gibran, um, with so much going on in the world. But he said a long time ago, an eye for an eye, and the whole world would be blind. Feels a little bit like we're in that kind of stage a little bit at the moment. So yeah, maybe for today, a little bit of a reflection on forgiveness and just not carrying with us some of these things that can cause so much suffering. So maybe before we do that, we'll just start with a landing practice in the normal way, just to settle in and be here in a kind of present and kind way. So I guess just to start with an invitation to settle into a comfortable position. Could be sitting or standing or lying, whatever you feel comfortable. And then in your own time, just gently closing your eyes or lowering your gaze. And just bringing the attention gently to the breath as it passes in and out of your nose, as it travels down your throat and fills your lungs and your chest. Maybe noticing that slight expansion and then the gentle contraction as the body breathes out and the air flows back out through the nose. And there's that little moment of stillness and that little pause before the body breathes again. So just following that natural cycle and allowing, without any sense of control, just allowing the body to breathe naturally in its own rhythm today. Just following each in-breath as the breath arises, and then noticing the out-breath as the breath passes before the next in-breath. And just noticing the characteristic of each breath. Are the breaths easy? Or maybe you've got a bit of a cold, or maybe they're a bit labored today. Are the breaths short or are they long? Are they deep or are they subtle and shallow? There's no right or wrong, just noticing right now what those breaths are like. And also noticing as we have our attention on the breath as part of this exercise, just noticing how our mind can perhaps slightly quieten. We get to see more of what's happening in the here and now, in the present moment. And that might be an ease following each in-breath and each out-breath. Or it might just be a noticing that actually the mind on this Monday morning is particularly busy. And if that's the case, just seeing it and seeing the thoughts and plans arising, and just choosing on this occasion, this moment that we've set aside for ourselves, just to see those thoughts, maybe just to name them, but to bring the attention gently and kindly back to the breath. As this is some time we set aside just to be with the here and now. And so we use the movement of the breath as our anchor to the present moment, to what's actually happening as life unfolds right now. Our blood taking that oxygen all through the whole of our body, and then taking the carbon dioxide back to our lungs and that air passing back out, so that we can feel each in-breath filling the whole of our body with life, and each out-breath acting as an exhaust so that the next in-breath can take place. And we can choose to be with this cycle wherever's most comfortable for us. It might be the sense of the whole body breathing, or it might be just focusing on the tip of the nose, noticing the cooler air entering the nose and the warmer air exhaling. Whatever feels comfortable for you. If we notice that our mind has moved off into thought, just giving a little inner smile and remembering that the practice is this coming back to the here and now. So just gently and without any judgment, gently and kindly placing our attention back on the breath. And we do this as many times as is necessary, because this waking up out of thoughts, waking up out of being away from the present moment, this is the practice, to just keep coming back. And coming back again. Each breath arising and each breath passing. And as we move towards the end of this landing practice, just noticing if those words prompt the mind to move off into any thoughts. Because the nature of the mind is that an external or an internal prompt will cause it to create thoughts. We can choose to follow those and engage with them, or just to notice that they're arising, but to allow them to pass by putting our attention back on the breath. So just using this as an opportunity to see the nature of the mind. Nothing wrong with it. That's its purpose and incredibly helpful at many times. But just now, as we've set aside some time just to be with our breath, just seeing any thoughts, giving it in a smile and just returning back with our awareness to the arising and the passing of the breath. And to that sense of the whole body, just gently and naturally breathing. And in your own time, just gently opening your eyes, and we'll come back together again. You might like to have a little stretch or a drink, and then we'll go into the main practice in a moment. And just while we do, I wanted to read a short, very short phrase from the poet Rumi, because he talks about why would you stay in a prison of your own creation if you could escape it, because at all times the door is open. And so when we're talking about forgiveness, um, sometimes just being aware of the fact that we can either carry thoughts towards other people or very often thoughts towards ourselves in a way that just continues a suffering that's occurred. And actually sometimes there's active steps we can take to end that suffering by changing our relationship to it and exploring forgiveness. So maybe now if we could go back into another practice on that. So just settling back into that comfortable position, maybe gently closing your eyes or lowering your gaze. And we'll start just by settling back on the breath before moving on. Just noticing the breath arising and the breath passing. Noticing if any thoughts or feelings or judgments arise, and just seeing them, and if necessary, naming them, and gently bringing the attention back to the breath. that feeling of the whole body breathing. And as we soften and settle into this moment, this here and now, we're going to intentionally bring to mind some of the actions and things we've done, and use that as a vehicle to explore forgiving ourselves and forgiving others. So we might start by just quietly reflecting. There are many ways over the years of my life that I have intentionally or unintentionally hurt or harmed others. I've caused them suffering. Maybe out of my pain or fear or anger or confusion. Nonetheless, I've caused suffering and have hurt them. See if you can just get a feeling of regret or sorrow that arises thinking about this. There may be certain particular events that come to mind, or just a more general sense. And just allowing that feeling to exist. Maybe picturing any of the memories if they still burden your heart. And just asking for forgiveness. Maybe to any of the people you can visualize, or just generally. I ask for your forgiveness. And just gently repeating that for a few moments. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, I realize that I have caused suffering, and I ask for your forgiveness. And then bringing the attention back to the breath, and then using that to widen into a sense of the body, and just noticing what's arising. It might be a sense of sorrow or upset. It might be a sense of lightness at the asking for forgiveness. There's no right or wrong, just noticing how the body and the heart is feeling as a result of asking for forgiveness. Remembering that it's part of the human experience, the magical but sometimes clumsy way of lives interacting with each other, that at times we do things that cause harm and suffering without intending it, but other times, through being in a place of unhappiness or sorrow or sadness or stress, we might intentionally cause harm, even if we regret it later. And just recognizing that that is part of the human experience. and just asking for forgiveness. And then bringing the attention back to the feeling in the body. Just noticing what's arising. And if there's a particular event or interaction that's calling loudly for your attention that keeps coming back, maybe is unresolved in some way, just maybe noticing that. And we're going to just park it to the side, and it can be explored later in the day if you feel that that's something that might be worth asking for an apology for. Or there may not be any such particular event, there may just be a sense of wider reflection on the experience of living. And just resting our attention back in the feelings that have been generated in the body, whatever's arising right now. Just allowing that to be, softening to it. And if it helps, you can always put a hand on the heart. Be aware of the feelings that arise. Or just internally reflecting that just as we have harmed others, often unintentionally, but maybe at times in pain or anger, also intentionally, so others have harmed us. And these may be minor harms or very hurtful harms. And they may have been created accidentally, inadvertently, without any deliberate sense by the person that's hurt us. Or they may also have been intentional. But just reflecting on this life we live, these interactions we have with each other, that they don't always go as we'd hoped or planned, or that as others had hoped or planned. So we just say to ourselves, there are many ways that I have been harmed by others, knowingly or unknowingly, in thought or word or deed. Seeing if we can just say to ourselves, I've carried this hurt in my body and in my heart. But now, to the extent I'm able to, I'm going to let it go and offer forgiveness to whoever created it, whether it was intentional or not. To those who've offered, to those who've caused me harm, I offer you my forgiveness, and I forgive you. And just quietly repeating to ourselves, I offer you forgiveness and I forgive you. To the extent that we're able to do so. And then we again repeat that sense of dropping back into the feelings of the body. Just noticing what feelings are arising in our heart and through our body as we make this pledge of forgiveness. Allowing those feelings to be whatever they are, just softening to them and allowing them. And remembering that there's no right or wrong in this practice, just being with whatever is arising, that is the practice. There may be a sense of lightness, of release from the forgiveness from the end of the chapter. Or there may be strong feelings of anger at something that was so harmful that actually you're just not ready to release it right now. If that's the case, just noticing that, allowing that, being with that, and noticing that that's not yet able to be forgiven or released. Just being with whatever is arising in the body and in the heart. If there are strong feelings arising, just using the arising and the passing of the breath, or the sensation of your body on the floor or the chair beneath you, just as a touch point to provide an anchor if strong feelings are arising, to notice that those aren't the only things happening. There's also the breath. There's also the feelings in the body, the feet on the floor. There may be sounds arising. Just noticing that any strong feelings that have arisen, allowing them, but noticing that they're not everything, that other things are also occurring simultaneously. Seeing if we can allow all of those things to happen at once. And now moving on to quietly reflect on the fact that, as well as interactions with others, we've had a lifetime of interactions with ourselves. There may be ways that we have hurt or harmed ourselves, maybe not believed in ourselves, or betrayed ourselves in thought or word or deed, again, knowingly or unknowingly. And just feeling that sense of the uniqueness of this person that each of us is, this living incarnation, all other people, and just extending forgiveness to ourselves for the fact that we don't always get it right and we may have hurt ourselves. And seeing if we can explore just extending a full and heartfelt forgiveness to ourselves. None of us are perfect because perfect doesn't exist. And indeed, sometimes by trying to be too perfect, we may actually cause harm to ourselves or others. So seeing if we can recognize our own humanity and the fact that sometimes we've got it right and sometimes we've got it wrong. And just forgiving ourselves. And just repeating that gently to ourselves for a few moments. I forgive myself. And then dropping back into that sense of awareness of what is the body feeling? What is the heart feeling? And the invitation is simply to notice those feelings and notice if they change moment to moment. There's no need to discuss them or rationalize them, just simply to notice and soften to whatever's arising. Noticing the feelings arising out of the heart space and whether they've changed or are the same throughout the course of this practice. What's the feeling arising right now? And whatever that feeling is, however strong or subtle, however easy or painful, just seeing if we can notice that underpinning it at all times is that flow of the breath arising and the breath passing. And the feeling of our body, the feeling of maybe our feet on the floor under us, supporting us. And as we move towards the end of the practice, just taking a moment to do two things. First is just to notice if anything arose that we don't feel able to forgive. And if that occurred, just allowing that to be, not judging ourselves or criticizing ourselves for that, but instead just noticing it, clocking it, and setting the intention that we'll revisit that in the future to see if there's a way that it can be partially or gradually forgiven. And the second is that if thoughts have arisen about any particular ways we've hurt others that arose during the practice, just giving an internal commitment to see if we can avoid repeating those now that we have learnt that they've caused suffering. And just concluding with an internal reflection that I've created suffering for which I ask for forgiveness. And suffering's been inflicted upon me for which I offer forgiveness. Then I recognize that I'm not perfect and that the concept of perfection doesn't exist. I will seek to find a way to reduce suffering and increase forgiveness. At whatever speed and in whatever ways are right for me. And that that's okay at that speed and in those ways. And at all times when exploring these issues, I'm going to keep at least part of my awareness in the present moment, with the breath arising and the breath passing, and the feet on the floor or the body on the seat under us. Grounded and anchored in reality. And in your own time, I'd like to gently open your eyes and we'll come back together. And I'll just stop the recording now for those listening to it.